Good evening. I'm Xavier Salomon, Peter Jay Sharp Chief Curator at the Frick Collection in New York, and welcome to this episode of Travels with a Curator. We travel this evening to Italy again, and we travel to the Marche, the area, the region in the central eastern part of Italy towards the Adriatic. And specifically, we go to the city of San Severino Marche, a beautiful small city. Here you see the lower part of the city seen from the upper part on top of the hill. This is a city whose origins go all the way back to antiquity, to prehistory, to Roman times, to the Middle Ages. And it is known today as the city of San Severino in honor of a bishop saint, Severinus, who lived in the 6th century. He was made bishop of this town around 540, and he died in 545, 5 years later. And this is a 17th century later reliquary showing you the saint as the patron of the city. San Severino, and you see it here in a 17th century map, is surrounded by walls. What you see at the top of this map is the upper part of the city. There is an upper city and a lower one, the upper one with a number of medieval churches and monuments, the lower one based around this oval square that you see, which is the market square of San Severino, still there to this day, a very beautiful, large, monumental Italian square. In 2016, unfortunately, San Severino was one of the cities very badly hit by the earthquake, which affected this area of the Marche. But in the last 4 years, the city has been reconstructing and healing the wounds of this terrible event. And they've been doing a great job dealing with it and getting the city to start its life again. But as I say, it's a very beautiful, very interesting city and worth visiting for its monuments. Now, how is the Frick connected to San Severino? And the connection is actually through something that was not made in San Severino. It's this great gold ground painting by the 14th century artist Paolo Veneziano, an artist, as the name says, who lived and worked in Venice. And the links between Venice and the Adriatic coast on both sides, all the way down to the south of Italy, were very well established at this point. There were mercantile links, there were artistic, cultural connections. And so we have works by Paolo Veneziano and his workshop all the way down the Adriatic coast, all the way down to Lecce in Puglia. This work, this painting, arrived at the Frick collection in 1930. It was one of the gold grounds acquired by Helen Clay Frick, Henry Clay Frick's daughter, who was very interested in these sort of paintings. And it is very important for a number of reasons. It is arguably the greatest Paolo Veneziano in the United States, one of the best, if not the best, outside of Europe. It is signed and dated at the bottom. And it is signed and dated by Paolo together with his son Giovanni, and it is dated 1358. So it is actually the last known documented work by Paolo. So very important historically, very important for its artistic importance. It shows the coronation of the Virgin. So there is Christ in sitting on this extraordinary, wonderfully decorated throne, crowning his mother, the Virgin Mary. And they're surrounded by angels making music, playing musical instruments. And many experts and people who've been interested in musical instruments in the Middle Ages in Italy have looked at this work to see the different shapes of various musical instruments at that time. The detail I particularly love about this painting is the sun and the moon at the feet of the Virgin and Christ, which the sun obviously is gilt. The moon would have originally been silvered. It now looks bluer, darker gray, but originally would have been silver leaf. And you see the inscription at the bottom of the throne with the signature and date. Just to give you a couple of examples of works by Paolo Veneziano, this is his famous Pala Feriale, which is the altar frontal, which would have decorated the altar of the Basilica of St. Mark's in Venice, with scenes. Well, at the top you have Christ, the Virgin, and a series of saints. Below you have scenes from the life and miracles of St. Mark. Another example is this beautiful polyptych, which was made for the Franciscan Church of Santa Chiara in Venice, which doesn't exist anymore, but is now in the Gallerie dell'Accademia in Venice. It's actually one of the very first things you see as soon as you walk into the museum. What you will notice immediately is that the central panel of this very complex polyptych shows, again, the coronation of the Virgin. And on the right and left, you have episodes from the life of Christ, the Passion of Christ. And at the top, you have a series of smaller scenes, including scenes from the lives of the saints Francis and Clare. So, as I said, Santa Chiara was a Franciscan institution, and so there are links to those saints as well. But this makes us understand that the painting at the Frick was not a painting that lived on its own. It's part of a much larger ensemble. And it is directly linked to something that is held at the Pinacoteca Civica, the local museum of San Severino Marche. And here you see this polyptych on gold ground, showing a series of saints on two tiers. On the lower level, you have full-length saints. From left to right, they are Saint Catherine, Saint Michael, the Archangel, Saint John the Baptist. At the center, you have Peter and Paul, Peter with the keys of heaven, Paul with his sword and the book of letters. Then you have Saint Philip, Saint Dominic, and Saint Ursula, who is accompanied by some of the other followers who were martyred with her in Cologne. So a selection of saints, two female saints flanking it, on the left Catherine, on the right Ursula, at the center the two key saints of the Catholic Church, Peter and Paul, but very indicatively you have Saint Dominic. And this was an altarpiece made for a Dominican context, and you can understand that even further by looking at the saints on the upper register. So on the left, starting again from left to right, you have, not surprisingly, Saint Severinus, the patron saint of San Severino Marche, then followed by Saint Venanzio, another local saint. And then you have Saint Peter Martyr, who is a Dominican saint, and on the opposite side, Saint Thomas Aquinas, another Dominican saint. And finally, two apostles, Thomas and Bartholomew. Looking at this, you understand immediately that it's not complete. There are parts missing. But obviously, this is also two parts of something bigger that were then attached together. And the central panel is clearly missing. And in 1977, a German art historian, Hannah Kiel, proposed that the Frick panel with the coronation of the Virgin was originally the central part of this polyptych made for San Severino Marche. And here I'm showing you a rather crude reconstruction. The frame of a painting, of course, is not the original frame, so that should be ignored. But just to give you a sense of how this would have looked as an object altogether, of course, you have to imagine there would have been parts above the coronation of the Virgin, maybe even below. There are definitely some pinnacles missing. It's an incomplete object. But since this proposal was put forward in 1977, it has been generally accepted by most scholars. There's been some exceptions. It's a debate that is still ongoing. But we don't have, unfortunately, any documents or any proof that this altarpiece was all one object and was made this way. And we don't have any documents about its creation. But we have stylistic tools that can make us understand how these objects went together. And so when you look at the detailing of this altarpiece, the halos, the punchwork, a lot of the details of the figures, you realize that they're very consistent. And so it's very likely that Kiel's proposal is actually right. Here's just to give you a sense of the structure, the wooden structure of this altarpiece. It's a massive object. This is the part in San Severino. In the vitrine to the right, you see some objects, including a reliquary that also came from the church. And actually, we know that the church this polyptych was made for held relics of a number of saints shown in it, like Saint Philip, Saint Catherine, Saint Ursula, and so on. But you also see from the back of it that this has been joined together more recently. It's been put together in a number of different ways at different points in its history. The detailing of the polyptych is fantastic. Paolo Veneziano is a real master at showing the wealth, the richness of textiles, of different textures, and look at the detail, for example, of the armor of Saint Michael on the left, or the ermine trimmed dresses of Saint Catherine and Saint Ursula. I mean, this is a truly extraordinary way of painting, and it's something that made Paolo and his workshop the most important painter at the origin of Venetian painting as we know it. He is the first great Venetian artist that is recorded. Now, where did the altarpiece come from? And this is somewhat problematic as well. It is first documented, the San Severino part, in this church, the Church of Santa Maria del Glorioso, which is just outside of San Severino. And it was there in the 1820s. Our panel at the Frick comes from the Hohenzollern collection. It was already there in the 1870s, and it remained there until 1930, pretty much, when the Frick collection acquired it. And our panel has supposedly a provenance from Ravenna, which is not too far away from San Severino. It's also on the Adriatic coast, north of San Severino. But we have no idea if the painting actually was in Ravenna and how it got there from San Severino. But by the early 1820s, the polyptych was already taken apart. What has been proposed, and seems to be the case, is that this polyptych was made by Paolo Veneziano for the key Dominican church in San Severino. This is a church of Santa Maria del Mercato, which is now known as the Church of San Domenico. And it's just outside the city walls where that square that I showed you at the beginning is. So it's just a 2-minute walk from the square. And here you see the church with its bell tower, its cloister. The church was a 13th century church that was then refurbished in the 15th century and most recently in the 17th century. So what you see today, the facade and the interior of the church, date from pretty much the 17th century. The cloister still has remnants. It's very austere, rather beautiful cloister, still has remnants of its medieval and early Renaissance phase. You see the bell tower in the background. The interior of the monastery, of the structure of the monastery, what remains, still has parts that go back to the Middle Ages and the 15th century. There are remnants of frescoes which were found in some of the side chapels in the church near the bell tower. This is just one to give you an example. But the church today looks like this. It is very much a 17th century church. The dimensions of it, more or less, are probably the original ones. The original structure is the same in terms of size and shape, but of course, all of the decoration is much later. It's unclear when Paolo Veneziano's altarpiece was removed from this church. Maybe it happened already in the 15th century with a first refurbishment. Maybe it was in the 17th century. But as I said, by the early 19th century, the altarpiece was already separate, with the San Severino part in San Severino and the central panel in Germany, and then in the 20th century at the Frick. So this is an object that still deserves a lot of study. People are working today again on it. There are all sorts of proposals about what the upper part of this altarpiece may have looked like. It was suggested that a painting of the crucifixion now in Melbourne in Australia was originally the top part of this altarpiece, but that doesn't seem to be the case, again, based on stylistic grounds. But we very much hope that one day we will be able to show this altarpiece together. It has not been seen together since at least the early 19th century, if not before. And this is a project that we very much hope to accomplish together with the city of San Severino. It would be wonderful at one point to be able to see it all back again together, both in New York and in San Severino. And so we very much hope to be able to do that. And in the meantime, I encourage you all to visit the Marche and visit the beautiful city of San Severino, which is nestled in the middle of beautiful countryside, a lot of very interesting towns around it with great works of art from the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the 17th, 18th century, a truly extraordinary and wonderful part of Italy. Thank you for joining me this evening, and I look forward to seeing you all next week with another Travels with a Curator.